Okay, this is lesson 4-6, distance on a number line. Make sure that you're taking notes that include examples, definitions, terminologies, procedures, questions you may have, and write down the learning target for this lesson.
A family of runners position themselves near the starting line of a race to make the race fair. Which runner has the greatest head start over another runner? Which runner has the least head start over another runner?
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, using your companion page, go ahead and try to answer that question. And then remember also that there's always the reflect at the bottom. Go ahead and pause at this time. Okay, welcome back. Now let's compare your answers to the answers that are on this answer key here. And let's compare the reflect. Again, remember the wording may be different that you chose, but is the same concept there. How did you determine who had the head start? Go ahead and pause as you compare your answers. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
In the launch, you may have used addition or subtraction to find the distances between the runners. Subtraction is not commutative. In what situations does the order in which you subtract two numbers not matter?
Okay, so let's go to our examples now.
Different types of clouds occur at different levels of the atmosphere. Stratus clouds occur about 2 kilometers above the ground. Cirrus clouds occur about 10 kilometers above the ground. Nimbostratus clouds occur about 1 3/10 kilometers above the ground. Altostratus clouds occur about 4 1/10 kilometers above the ground. Cumulonimbus clouds occur from 2 8/10 kilometers to 6 6/10 kilometers above the ground. Suppose a cirrus cloud is 10 kilometers above the ground, and a stratus cloud is 2 kilometers above the ground. If you subtract the height of the stratus cloud from the height of the cirrus cloud, you find out how much higher the cirrus cloud is than the stratus cloud. If you subtract the height of the cirrus cloud from the height of the stratus cloud, you find out how much higher the stratus cloud is than the cirrus cloud. The cirrus cloud is 8 kilometers higher than the stratus cloud. The stratus cloud is 8 kilometers lower than the cirrus cloud. Reversing the order of the subtraction changes the sign of the difference, but not the absolute value of the difference. The distance between the clouds is 8 kilometers. The absolute value of the difference between the cloud heights is the distance between the clouds, without the information about which cloud is higher or lower.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, when we saw them do the math, you should have noticed that one was a positive 8 and one was a negative 8. And that, remember, the negative sign is just telling us that it's lower, and a positive just tells us above or higher. It just indicates a direction. But in both examples, they were 8 units from each other. The symbol, the addition or the subtraction symbol, just indicates the direction.
Altostratus clouds occur about 4 1/10 kilometers above the ground. Nimbostratus clouds occur about 1 3/10 kilometers above the ground. Write two different absolute value expressions for the distance in kilometers between the nimbostratus cloud and the altostratus cloud. How far apart are the clouds?
So go ahead and pause the video as you try to write your two different absolute value expressions to find the distance between the two clouds. Okay, thank you for coming back. The distance between the clouds is the absolute value is the difference of their heights. So the nimbostratus cloud that was at 1.3 kilometers and the altostratus cloud that is at 4 1/10 kilometers, we can write it either as 4 1/10 subtracting 1 3/10, which we're going to find is 2 and 8/10 difference, or we could take the 1 and 3/10 and subtract the 4 and 1/10, and we're going to find that that's a negative 2.8. Again, remember, these are just the directions. This is telling us that the altostratus is this much higher, where this one is telling us the nimbostratus is this much lower. But when we take the absolute value of either case, we find that it is simply 2 and 8/10 kilometers apart.
What is the distance between the top and the bottom of this group of clouds?
Okay, so the cumulus nimbus cloud is a really exciting cloud. That is your thunderstorm cloud. That is where we get our severe weather. So this cloud tends to be very strong and very tall. And so what we're looking at is from the height of it to the bottom of it, what is our distance? Go ahead and pause to try to solve this. Okay, thank you for coming back. The distance between the top and the bottom of this cloud, or these groups of clouds, would be 4 and 1/8 subtracting 1 and 3/4. We're going to have to write them as a mixed number, give them a common denominator. And when we do that, we'll find that it's 9/8. Or we can take and rewrite that as a proper fraction and a mixed number, and it's 2 and 3/8, which is going to be the distance between the top and the bottom is 2 and 3/8 of a mile. Okay, let's go ahead and go to part 2 of our examples. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to this.
You can also use absolute value to find the distance between points on a number line when one or both coordinates are negative. How far apart are the abyss and the cloud? What is the height of the midnight zone?
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, they're asking us to find the difference between the abyss and the cloud. So we need to take and write an equation for that. And they've also asked us to, well, let's listen to what they wanted us to do again.
You can also use absolute value to find the distance between points on a number line when one or both coordinates are negative. How far apart are the abyss and the cloud?
Okay,
What is the height of the midnight zone?
sorry about that. So the abyss to the cloud, and then the abyss to the twilight zone is called the midnight zone. So we need to find that height, or what is the distance between these two. So there's two equations to be writing. Go ahead and pause to write those equations and solve. Sorry for that, I hit the wrong button. Okay, thank you for coming back. Let's look at that. If we're looking at the height of the cloud, we're going to, from the abyss, we take and subtract the difference, and we find that it is 9,008. I'm sorry, they were doing the midnight zone there, aren't they? The midnight zone, if we take the top of the midnight zone and subtract the bottom of the midnight zone, we find that we have a difference of 9,800 feet. So that is the height. If we look at the abyss to the distance of the cloud, we take this cloud and we can subtract the altitude of the abyss. My goodness, it's getting late for me. And when we do that, we find that we're actually having a double negative minus a negative, subtracting a negative, which will give us a positive. So when we combine that and we take the absolute value, we find that we are 18,100 feet apart. Hopefully these aligned with your answers. Go ahead and rewind and review these if you need to. Okay, so let's check our understanding.
A whale dives from the twilight zone to the midnight zone. How far does the whale dive?
Okay, so how do we set this up to know how far he's dived? We're going to find the difference. So go ahead and pause to do that. Okay, thank you for coming back. So we know that he started at negative 2,500 feet. He's negative because he's below seawater, because he's in the ocean. And he dives to 10,200 feet below sea level, or a negative 10,200, because remember that just indicates directions. So we're setting this up and we have negative 2,500 and we're going to subtract that negative 10,200, giving us a double negative, which in turn is a positive. So when we combine these two, we end up with 7,700, which the absolute value is still 7,700. So that is the distance that the wheel dived. Okay, go ahead and pause this as you need. Rewind, make sure that you go through your notes, any questions you had to clarify, and join us for part 2.